Well, I never expected that song to fit so absolutely perfectly with what I'm going to say today. I just sat there and thought, wow, this is awesome, because we do leave footprints behind. And the life we live for others. I'm going to tell my journey, the journey we've been on, and hopefully you can learn from our journey and the things we've learned. I have people come up to me and they say, I could never be a missionary. And I say, I know exactly how you feel. Because God calls us to do things that we ourselves cannot do. And it's easy to back off and say, no, I can't do it. But it's awesome to follow God because He will make a way. And I like how the lesson study goes along with this, because there's one point in the lesson study that I think is the crucial thing, and that is obedience. We read the text this morning, the verse, and in that verse, these are the last words Jesus gave. And He said, "Go ye into all the world." That's not easy. But today it's far easier than it ever has been in the past. So I'm going to just start by telling how it all worked out. When I was a youngster, about the age of some of these, I was in a church. It was the Elmshaven Church in California. And today I realize what a blessing I had. I didn't realize it at the time, but in my Sabbath school, we would have missionaries come to tell mission stories. Elder Brown, Paul Quimby, Ellen White's granddaughter. And I just sat there and thought that everybody had that privilege. And not until many years later did I realize, wow, that's not the case. But listening to that and seeing that, I think that's where it began, this idea of, going into all the world. And from there, God led in many different ways, led me through seminary and everything. And finally, I went to the general conference. I said, okay, do you have openings for missionaries? And at that time, they said, well, we had openings for administrators to work in institutions or doctors to work in hospitals, but no, we don't send out missionaries like that anymore. Those frontier missionaries, that doesn't happen. So it was a little discouraging to have that happen. We asked several times, it never worked out. And then we heard about Adventist Frontier Missions, and we were interested in that, but before that I went down to be pastor in Cookeville, Tennessee. And I think God had a reason for me there, because it wasn't an easy church. I'd often pray and I'd say, God, why did you send me here? I don't have the talents to deal with these folks here, because this was a church that was half made up of Northerners and half Confederates. And they'd forgotten the Civil War had ended long ago. And so it was not a comfortable situation to be in. But it's like God said, I know your talents don't deal with it, but I have a lot of things for you to learn here that you may not know. And so really Tennessee was sort of the jumping off point to go to the Philippines. And God opened those doors. And it was exciting to think, okay, we're going to go, we're going to, the whole family was going, we're going to be missionaries, you have all these wonderful feelings until you get there. Because as we tried to figure things out, we just couldn't figure out things very well. And we thought, well, when we get there, it'll become, clear what we're supposed to do. And when we got there, we found out it doesn't become clear, it only gets worse. And I remember those first 6 months, if you'd orchestrated it to make things be as wrong as possible, you couldn't hardly have come up with something better. That, I am afraid that if there had been an airplane sitting there saying you can get on and go back, it would have been a sore temptation to do that, but we stayed on. But the big question when you get there is you say, okay, what now? What are we supposed to do? I mean, it seems so obvious when you're planning, but when you get there, you say, okay, what do we do? Okay, we're supposed to baptize people? Because Philippines is notorious for, baptizing thousands of people and all of that kind of thing. But unfortunately, when you get there, you find that, yes, that does happen, but the vast majority of those people who are baptized never show up in church again. That I remember one time I went up to northern Palawan, and there's a town there called New Ibahai. And the person with me said, oh, this is almost all Adventist. And I said, well, that's really good. It's all Adventist. And he said, well, not that good. They're all backslidden Adventists. And so, I realized I could baptize a lot of people. All I have to do is give out a free hat like other people do, or, a little rice or something like that. I can baptize them. But what is the purpose of baptizing people if they never get to heaven? I mean, that's sort of a dead-end street. And so you say, okay, well, the next best thing, Americans go over to the Philippines. There's cheap land there. And so they buy some land and they build buildings they have this vague idea of a ministry. And then they get the buildings all built. And then they say, okay, now what do we do now? So that doesn't really work either. So I'm there, I'm having to think, what is our purpose for being here? How do we deal with people? And as I thought about this, I thought, okay, our way of evangelism, it's very, I'd sat in on some of the evangelistic series and things like that. And I remember one time I was in a meeting there, and the preacher was up front preaching away. It was hot, it was sweaty, the moths were going around the light bulbs. And he was preaching the 2,300-day prophecy and the 49-week prophecy through a translator. And the translator was valiantly trying to keep up, and he'd stop to try to think of a word, and the preacher would go on. And I mean, the people were very entertained by it, but I'm not sure that they were understanding what was going on. And I asked the preacher, I said, why don't you give some sermons dealing with the needs of the people here, like maybe what to do with a witch living next door or something like that would be practical. And he said, well, I have to get through all 28 fundamental beliefs before I leave. And so that made me sort of think, okay, what's going on here? And as I thought about it, I went through all 28 fundamental beliefs, and I found no problem there. I said, yeah, that's right. I might, quibble about something, maybe how the wording was, but everything was right. So I thought, well, so that's not the problem. So what's going on here? And I thought, well, in the Bible, I go back to the Bible, I think, how were things done in the Bible? And I thought, well, Jesus, he's our example. So let me read some of the sermons that Jesus had. And I realized that he didn't have a whole lot of sermons. In fact, sometimes he said some things that made it sort of hard for us theologically, like the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And I was asked, why in the world did he give that example? But I thought, okay, well, he does have one sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And so I read through the Sermon on the Mount. And you know what I found out? The Sermon on the Mount hits absolutely none of the 28 fundamental beliefs. and so I said, so what's going on here? And as I thought about it, I think, okay, we have the theoretical. You have the part of your mind, it's 1/3 of your mind is the theoretical part of your mind that thinks about things, it does mathematics, it's a rational part of your mind, it does all of those kind of things. But then you have 2/3 of your mind, it's what you might call the subconscious part of your mind, the part of your mind that, it feels, it does all the other things. It's all those things down that you don't think about so much. But it's very, very important. It's a part of your mind because many times our decisions are made by that part of your mind rather than the other, the theoretical part of your mind. And so I thought, what's going on here? And I realized that, like I said, nothing's wrong with those fundamental beliefs, but there's another part of our mind that we have to deal with also. And I thought what makes it easier sometimes is bring it down out of the religious theological realm and bring it down into the practical realm. And when you bring it down to the practical realm, sometimes things make more sense. I'm not sure why that is, but it is. And I thought, it's like if you're learning to drive a car or fly an airplane. If you want to fly an airplane, you study these books. You can study about aeronautics. You can study about all this kind of stuff. You can learn all the information. That deals with the theoretical part of your mind. But would you like to get in an airplane that the pilot, all he had done was read books? No, I don't think you would want to do that. You'd say, no, I'd like him to go out and fly an airplane first and make sure he can do it. And do you see what's happening? We're dealing with the other part of your brain that is the part that teaches you that kind of thing. So you look at it and you can get a pilot who knows how to fly the airplane but done none of the study. And he can be extremely dangerous because there's things that could get him because he's unaware of them. And in theology, it's the same way in that we need to train the action part. Now, when you look at Jesus, what did he do? With Jesus, he had the 12 disciples. And did he sit there and go over a lot of theology with them? No, he did the practical thing. They walked with him for 3 years, reaching out to people, doing those things, ministering to people. And if you noticed his life, he didn't usually spend a lot of time talking. He spent time living. And that made the difference. He was mentoring them along. And that is how we train the other part. If we just hit the theology and nothing else and baptize them, what we see, like in the Philippines, you have people who are Adventists on the outside and basically Catholics on the inside, at least in the lowlands. Or you can do it in the mountains. You can have, we have the Palawanos come to us and they say, oh, we believe in many gods. There's Ampo Pare, there's Ampo Sakit, there's Ampo Batu, there's all those gods. Jesus is just one of those. And, they're willing to get baptized because, we got to keep them all happy. But you have to say, no, there's something deeper. Because I could baptize them, but when they get sick, do you know where they go? They'll go to the witch doctor. They'll go to the shaman. Even in the lowlands, that's what happens. You have them, they're baptized, but when they get sick, they go to, the shaman to take care of them. In other words, if we convert somebody on the outside, but not on the inside, what have we done? We've done nothing whatsoever. And so, realizing that, it makes me think of how in the world do you do this? And I think the best illustration, you've been here when I told you about Jillian, our adopted daughter. You know that story. And you know how we got her when she was 11 years old. She's an orphan. And she was a handful. I mean, she was, it's because she lived 11 years doing things her ways. She'd been through all sorts of horrible things. She'd been, a slave in the lowlands, all this kind of stuff. And she had learned to not trust anybody. She had learned that if she wanted to be secure, she had to run the show. She was one of those children, I don't know if you've seen them, they have this sparkling personality with everybody out there, but when they come home, it's a different story. And so that was a major challenge in, dealing with her. Fortunately, somebody had a little book. It was a purple book. They had raised some foster children. They said, "This is the book you need." And so we'd open that book and read that book, and we'd say, "That doesn't make any sense, but let's try it. Maybe it'll work." And it was amazing. It worked. It's sort of like the Bible. If we follow what the Bible says, it works. It's amazing how that works. And so, little by little, she started to, pull things together. It was interesting. One time when she was about 12 years old, she said to me, "Do you know why I act so bad?" And I said, "No, Jillian, why do you act that way?" And she said, "Because I am afraid to love you." And so anyway, we went through all of this. Jillian grew up. She eventually married. But the interesting thing is, I don't remember sitting down and going through all of the theological things with her. I mean, she got it here and there. She went to church and all of that. I don't remember telling her, "You have to do this," or "You have to do that," or, we just tried to be her parents and make sure she grew up a reasonable, decent person. And the amazing thing to me is that when she grows up, what does she do? But there's a village over in Marma. They'd been calling for a long time. "We need a missionary here. We want a school here. We want you to come over. Send somebody." And we say, "Sorry, we have nobody to send. We have nobody to send." And who was it that said, "We can go"? Junie and her husband and Jillian. He said, "We're going to go there." They went to Marma, 5 hours hike into the mountains, deep in the mountains. And they're running the school there. And when I watch Jillian, because she grew up as a Palawano, she can almost do a better job than I can in relating with them. Obviously, her Palawano is better than my Palawano. I mean, I get by. I can fool you into thinking I speak it perfectly, but I don't. And when I thought back about it, I say, I didn't really have an agenda for her. I wasn't there saying, "I'm going to work it out so this girl is going to do this and they're going to do this." The bottom line is we just loved her. Amen. That's all we did. We didn't have an agenda. And today, when you turn on your internet, when you answer your phone, when you look at your mail, everybody has an agenda for you. Isn't that right? Somebody's trying to pull off something to get you to do something. And unfortunately, sometimes we as Christians go out there thinking that we have an agenda for somebody else to do. Like we know how they're supposed to think and what they're supposed to do and all of that kind of stuff. If you look at Jesus, when he related to people, it wasn't one size fits all. You think about it when he met with Nicodemus. Was that the same way he dealt with the woman at the well? Totally different. Absolutely, completely different. Even when he healed people, some people he would touch. Some people he would just say something. Sometimes he'd say, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Go show yourself to the priest. It was a different way. Now, I don't understand exactly how, but he knew what needed to be done. Of course, he had the Holy Spirit. We have the Holy Spirit. But the thing is, we also have ears and eyes. Rather than going out thinking we are the people that are going to train you how to do things, maybe we need to go out and we need to listen and see what they actually need. See what their needs are. I was in Ohio just about a month ago. I don't know how many of you have seen this book by Philip Saman. Philip Saman, Christ's Method Alone. I'd never seen it, so the individual that had it gave me this book. And I'm halfway through reading it, and I said, this book is saying exactly what I learned there, but is saying it even more directly. That we think that our job is to go out and tell everybody what to do. But one of the bases of Christ's kingdom is freedom. We aren't here to coerce people. We are here. He tells a story. I just read it this morning. He tells a story. He was at a camp meeting or something like that, and the preacher was up front. He was preaching about how we need to love everybody. And it really moved Philip Saman. He said, wow, that's good. There's something I'd like to just ask him about. I feel, this guy really has a good message. I need to speak with him. So after the program, he goes back and he, finally gets to the preacher and he says, there's something I need to talk to you about. And he starts in, and the preacher says, well, I'm busy. Let's have prayer. He has prayer and leaves. And he's there saying, that was a great sermon, but your actions said something different. The problem is I'd encourage every one of you to get this book if you're interested in evangelism. But the problem is that evangelism is very expensive. Not in money, but in time. Because when you care about people, it takes time. With Jillian, how long did it take? When Jillian came along, all of our kids had left. They'd gone off to college. And we were thinking, okay, we have a little time for just the two of us. I think we had 1 week of time for the two of us. And then Jillian came along, it's like, just a minute, this didn't fit in the plans, this is not good. Can't we work something out? No, nothing else could work out. We could have easily said, no, it's not going to work, but we couldn't see the way Jillian was headed. We just, I guess you say we loved her already because we'd known her for 11 years, even when she had disappeared from the mountains and we had no idea where she was. And so we said, no, we've got to do something. And so we made that sacrifice. Now, as I look back over the last 15 years or so, and people ask about the sacrifice we made, I say we didn't make no sacrifice. I am so thankful we did what we did. It was what was needed. And the problem is, sometimes we think that if we have good intentions, that's good enough. Well, this is the way everybody does it. I have good intentions. I'm going to just do the same old thing. In the Bible, there's some stories like that. Remember Jacob? He had good intentions. What did he want? The blessing, right? And so he got busy and he got the blessing his way. Did it turn into be a blessing? It became a curse because he had to do it his own way. He was helping God. So we have to be careful because sometimes we think, well, I feel good. This should work. Or what about Abraham? Hey, you're going to have a son. You're going to have a son. Well, I guess we got to help God out on this one. He created a problem that's with us to this day. So we have to be very, very careful in what we're doing is saying, is this God's method? Is this what he wants us to do? I think of another story in Hezekiah. Remember Hezekiah? He was sick. And the prophet Isaiah goes to him and says, Hezekiah, set your house in order, you're going to die. Well, Hezekiah was not happy about that. He turned his face to the wall. He was pouting there. He says, God, I don't want to die. Change your decision. That's not good. You know what? God will answer our prayers sometimes when it's not the best for us. Remember the children of Israel? They said, give us meat, give us meat, give us meat. He says, okay, I'll give you meat because he wanted it so bad. And they had more than, they suffered because of that. And so, with Hezekiah, he said, okay, I want more life. So Isaiah goes back, he says, okay, God's heard your prayer. He's going to give you what you wanted. And do you realize they gave him the answer for his prayer, the emissaries from Babylon came. Hezekiah showed them all the wealth that he possessed. He didn't tell them about God or anything. And Isaiah came back, he says, what did those men do? And he said, they came to visit. I showed them everything in all my wealth. He says, someday the Babylonians will come and they will take everything you own. He says, when? He said, after you're dead. Oh, thank goodness. What an attitude. And do you realize that if Hezekiah had not lived, Manasseh would have never been born. Manasseh, the worst king that Israel ever had. For 55 long years. Faith is saying, God, I may not understand, but I trust that you are going to do things the right way. We have to understand that we're not here to help God. We're here to be obedient to him. We're here to do what he asks us to do. And if we're obedient, it's going to work out. We may not understand why now. There's lots of questions out there. Everybody has questions. Why do you think we have 1,000 years of millennium to ask all those questions we have never had asked that we were wondering about here? So, you ask, so how do you learn to love people? We loved Jillian just because, we knew her and all of that. But how do you learn to really love people? And it reminds me of a story that this happened many years ago. I had gone over to Consuli to have worship there. That's about a 45-minute hike through the Tomlong River and onto the other side. And when I got there after worship, this lady says, my daughter's really, really sick. I said, well, okay, why don't you carry your daughter to the clinic? She said, well, I can't because my husband's really sick and my other kids are sick too, but she's really sick. And I said, well, we'll get a Palawano here to carry your daughter to the clinic. So I started asking around. I said, okay, could you carry her daughter to the clinic? Oh, no, my back is hurting. I can't do that. Or, how about I haven't eaten breakfast. Nobody would carry her to the clinic. And I got really frustrated because, she needed to go to the clinic, and here nobody's willing to cooperate at all. And so I finally tell the woman, okay, I'll go with you to your house, and, we'll see what we can do. And so we start down the trail. Where's your house? Well, not far. So we hike and hike and hike. Well, how much farther? Just a little farther. We hike and hike and hike. Just a little farther. we hiked for 2 hours, just a little farther. I mean, it's just a little farther. And I got there, and here's this little nipa hut. It's about big enough to put a grand piano in, about that size. And here's 4 children. They're all sick. And I think, okay, now what do? I get to carry her back to the clinic. And I have American feet. I don't have Palawano feet because all the mountains are like this, everything's up and down. Well, at that moment, I'd been complaining to God all along, but at that moment, when the Palawanos comes around the corner, he says, I'll help you carry. And I said, okay, sorry, God, I shouldn't have been complaining so loudly. You're working out. So at that point, we worked it out. We were going to switch off because it was a long ways back to the clinic. And so we said, let's make this equal for all of us. And I said, okay, I will carry her downhill, you carry her uphill. Now, you might think that's unfair, but the reason that was because those hills were so steep, I couldn't carry her up the hill. I had to let him do that. Well, I'd left the house that morning at 8 o'clock. We arrived back at the clinic at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And she was so... when he was carrying her, I'd walk behind. I'd say, okay, I'm going to watch her because if she dies, there's no reason for us to take her to the clinic and, we'll just bury her here or something like that. Well, she got back, and she was so very sick that the next day, the helicopter pilot was down in the lowlands. He flew in. He picked her up. He also flew for 2 minutes over to her house where I'd walked all day and picked up her sister and took them down to the hospital. And a couple days later, I went down to the hospital to visit them, hiked out of the mountains. And there is Milka. That's her name, Milka. She was sitting on the bed. She was obviously feeling somewhat better, but she was just there looking at the floor. I was talking with her mother. She just looked at the floor and didn't respond. And finally, she just lifts her eyes and she looks at me and smiles a little smile and looks down again. And that just grabbed my heart because I realized that if I had not been there, she would probably be dead. And to this day, I have love for her. Not because of what she did for me, but what I did for her. So often I run into people, they say, well, I'd be willing to be a missionary. I'd be willing to do this. I'd be willing to do that. But God needs to make me feel like it first. And that's a really good alibi to come up with. But that's all it is an alibi. When God says go, he means it. Go. And so when he says go to the whole world, he means it. It's interesting when you think about it, that when Ellen White was alive, she said, Jesus should have come ere this. That was more than 100 years ago. He still hasn't come. What's going on? One of the things I realize is the hardest prison to escape from is the comfortable prison. The prison where you feel good, where everything's okay, where you have enough money to do what you have to do. The fact is that America is an anomaly. 92% of the world, their daily income is less than $45 a day. 45 cents. $45. That's 92%. That doesn't mean everybody's making $45. There's a small percentage that do it, and then it goes down from there.
Palawanos make $2 a day.
Yeah, for the Palawanos, they make $2 a day. If they're really good, they may make $3 a day. But money is not the issue here. The issue is that we're we have been called to go to the whole world. I was talking the other day, and somehow we got onto the subject of all these illegal aliens entering the United States. And there's a lot of people that are really upset about these illegals that are coming in. And I said, why do you think they're coming in? They're looking for better life. Now, many of them think a better life consists of more money. The fact is that if we had been out there showing them what the better life really was, maybe we wouldn't be suffering that problem today. And so here we are getting upset because we have not gone to them, so they're coming to us, and now we're upset that they're coming to us. You know, sometimes I think if you want to do evangelism, maybe go knocking on these doors and all these people that don't speak English say, hey, we're opening an English class. You want to come to it? And get to know them and to relate with them. It's interesting that as an AFM person, you know, we're supposed to come back and we're supposed to raise money and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't like to do that. I mean, the children do that far better than I do. But so we'll go around, we'll visit people. And what I found recently is I'll sit down with somebody. And, you know, I'm thinking, okay, I need to tell them about the project and about how we've accomplished this and this and this. And, you know, we have so many schools and we have the clinic and we have, you know, how many dollars, you know, how many people we've treated. And I sit there and guess what? They start talking and talking and talking and talking. And by the time we're through, guess what? I've said hardly anything. And I felt sort of guilty for it. I say, aren't I supposed to be saying something? And do you know what I'm finding? Those people are talking to me because they want to be a part of this project that's going on. And the way for them to feel that way is if I listen to them and understand where they're coming from. You know, over in the Philippines, there's lots of Mormons there. You always see them. There they are on their bicycle, going down the road with their tie on, sweat just pouring off their forehead. And you know what they're there for? To make more Mormons. That's it. I don't want us to be a church where we're just there to make more Adventists. We're there to get to know them, to relate with them, to converse with them, to understand their needs. And when we win their confidence because of our love for us, when everybody has problems, we say, hey, I think I might be able to help. That's what Christianity is about. You know, and people might ask, how did we get into this where we just hit all the 28 fundamental beliefs? And I'll tell you how. Many, many years ago, when the Adventist church began, the people we were going to were fellow Christians. And so the only difference was the doctrines. And so that's what you used. There's nothing wrong with using that if that's what's needed at this point. And so we'd present the doctrines, they'd look at it, they'd look at their Bible and say, wow, this is true. Let's join their church. And that was wonderful. Nothing wrong. But today we're dealing with people who are not Christians. You go to the devil worshipers there in Palawan. They don't know Jesus. I ask them, of all your gods out there, how many of them love you? And they think and think and think, and they say, none of them. I had people say to me, have you taught them righteousness by faith? And I said, you have to first teach them that there's such a thing as the law. They don't even know about a law. So you have to understand with the Holy Spirit, and by listening, we understand where people are at. We draw close to them. I was in a sermon in Seattle. There's a little church that I was at. I had to be out there for a while. And it was the Bonnie Lake Church. And he gave a sermon. He said, what are the most effective forms of evangelism? And he was saying, okay, you have radio, that's about 1%. And you have, I don't remember all the different things, but each one was about 1%. And then he said, but there's one that really stands out, 70%, something like that. He says, friendship. That's it. And so often we think, wow, we accept that, but sometimes we don't realize what that means exactly. I was just talking to somebody last week. And they said, I had a guy, he came to my church. Well, he called up and he said, I want to talk with somebody. I want to talk. So he went to visit him, and they sat down and they talked religion. And, they were talking about it and having a good time, and he visited him several times. And finally he said, hey, you want to visit our church? And the guy said, yeah, maybe I will. So one Sabbath, he's sitting up on front, and he saws this guy walk in and sit down. I thought, wow, that's really good. And so after the service is over, everybody's there. Talking, having a good time, everybody, wonderful, great, and it's a great church. They're all having this great time, and then he looked around, he couldn't find the guy. Well, I wonder what happened to him. So, he'd had some other things to do, so, he wondered where'd he go. So he was able to talk to him. He saw him a week later. He said, hey, what'd you think of our church? He said, well, it's okay. Yeah, well, honestly. He said, yeah, it's not a very friendly church. Now, if you'd been there and you'd looked around, you'd think, wow, it's really friendly. Look, everybody's there talking and everybody's having a good time. What were they doing? They were talking with themselves. They weren't looking out there and saying, hey, there's somebody new there. I don't even know him. I think I'll go over and get to know him. Listen to his story. Nobody did that. They were having such a good time conversing with themselves that they did not realize that there was somebody out there. If we realize our job is to go out there and get to know people, what I say in the Philippines, it's going to find the rest of the family. And the neat thing about it is that it is so incredibly natural. You just walk in, you just meet people, you get to know them, you listen. So often our listening is not listening. We're thinking of what conversation we want to have. We're thinking about how we're going to answer them. We're bored, we're whatever, we're not listening. But we need to understand where people are at, reach out to them. And that makes all the difference. Now for us in the Philippines, we've been there 28 years. By the standards of evangelism, we're a dismal flop because we haven't had 1,000 baptisms. We haven't done those things. We like to splash those banners around. Look at this, look at what we've done, look at all these things. But I'll tell you one thing that's really neat is I can hike into new areas of the mountains there, and they know who I am. And they're glad to see me, not because of me, but just because I'm there and that I care about them. If I get to heaven and there's no Palawanas there, that would be the most awful thing I can imagine. Because those people are our people. And that's how we need to be. Not to say, no, forget him. I had a guy come to me, he said, hey, well, I got a neighbor here, and I've been arguing with her about the Sabbath, and she refuses to accept the Sabbath. I said, why are you doing that? Obviously she's not ready for that. Lead them to Jesus. And let Jesus lead them in the way they're supposed to go. Is it quick? No. It's your life. Because the sermon we preach, the greatest sermon we preach is the life we live and not the words we speak. That's the most important thing. So, as I look at it all, God is in control of all things. I mean, I'm in a position right now where we're just sort of saying, one day at a time. You know, it's sort of like the last year and a half or so, things have just fallen apart. Leonda's mom died. We came back to deal with that. Then we had to deal with that house out there in Seattle. And Leonda's back in the mountains trying to run things. I'm trying to finish things up. And then the helicopter goes down. We lose Daniel and Janelle and 3 other people in that. And then we get the news that our son has glioblastoma. It's always fatal. And we have to come back for that. But you know what? God is in control. And I just pray to God. I say, God, with my son, whatever you see is best. If you want to prepare him for dying, and if he's going to be ready, that's okay with me. If you want to save his life, that's okay with me, because if you're ready for death, you're ready for life too. And so what it boils down to is slowing down. Don't feel like, I got to do this, but you say, listening, you say, God, what now? What now? I used to say, you got to say your prayers once a day. You know, more and more I'm realizing you got to pray all day long. Everything you're doing, you have to say, God, is this the right thing? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Am I supposed to be here? Listen to him and listen to others. Notice them. They are not out there to say, got another one, put another notch on my Bible. It's like that story about Boobet. Remember, I told you about that's Jillian's sister. She left the mountains. She went to Manila. We had no idea what she was doing. She was probably getting in some trouble or something. We didn't know. She had decided she would never come back to the mountains. No way. She was never going to. She hated the mountains. She wouldn't even let anybody know that she was a Palawano native. She would never go back. And we kept praying for her. And she's in the mountains now. She's teaching school in the mountains. We don't write people off. We hold them. We have one church member, his name is Sablito. He's totally gone the way of the world. Money has become his passion. He won't even talk to me. But I keep praying for him. You know, what else can you do? So that's what I'd like to say. Those are the lessons, some of the lessons I've learned. And if you can apply those lessons here, that's good. But I'd like to say one other thing. What I'd like to see in North America, I see so many churches that are struggling. It's because they've lost their vision. They're just going through the motions. They're doing the things. They're holding on. They're not bad people. But you know why God said to us, go to all the world? It's not just for their sake. It's for our sake. When we follow and we're obedient to him and we go beyond what we think we're able to do, we are the ones that come out on the top. All of us do. It's a win-win situation. God made it that way. And I would love to see every Adventist church in North America and beyond, that they in some way are involved in some foreign mission somewhere. So they have that vision. What I say is the light that shines farthest is the light that's brightest at home. So I just leave that for you. I encourage you, if you haven't read that book by Philip Saman, read it. It's an incredible book. I don't know how I've missed it for so long. I guess I've been in the Philippines and out of touch with all those kind of things. But he really tells it how we are. We are here to show God's love to the world. Not acting like it, but really caring for this world.